Hello, friends. Welcome to the mill. My name is James, and Dusty has once again very kindly allowed me to take over the channel for the week. Today I will be discussing Albion, one of the two factions from the Invaders from Afar expansion. Invaders from Afar is an excellent product if you have played through the game with the original factions and you would like a little bit more variety in your Scythe gameplay. Or if you have a couple of extra friends that you would like to bring to your Scythe game nights, Invaders from Afar allows you to bump the player count up to 7, which can make for a crowded board, but doesn't necessarily add a lot of time onto the game, as turns in Scythe tend to clip along rather quickly. Taking a look at Albion's starting territory, the first thing that you'll notice is that Albion does not start on a peninsula the way the original 5 classic factions do. Polonia has this peninsula here, 3 hexes, bordered by a lake and river, and all of the original factions do as well. This means that Albion can walk directly to the factory without needing to deploy any mechs to gain an additional ability, such as a river walk or the ability to move onto a lake. Taking a look at Albion's mech abilities, however, we will notice that the +1 movement from speed is missing, and instead we have 2 somewhat aggressive combat abilities and 2 somewhat more defensive combat abilities. The aggressive ones are Burrow, which allows you to move across rivers to or from an adjacent tunnel territory. As I've mentioned earlier, this isn't going to help me get to the factory. Instead, this is going to help me move onto the starting peninsulas of the original 5 factions. Sword. Before combat where you attack, your opponent loses 2 power. And then the 2 defensive abilities are Shield. Before combat where you defend, gain 2 power. And Rally. Move to any territory where you have either a worker or a flag token. This allows Albion to get quickly back into board position after being sent home in the case of a combat defeat. How do we get flag tokens onto the board? That's Albion's faction ability, Exalt. After moving your character, you may place a flag token on its territory. One nice thing about the digital edition is that moving my character gives me this flashing icon reminding me that I can place a flag here if I so choose. However, I don't typically place a flag on a hex that is adjacent to my home base for a couple of reasons. One, because the faction ability Rally, the mech ability rather, that allows me to move back into board position after being sent to my home base isn't particularly valuable if it's just one hex that's already adjacent to my home base. And the other reason is that I will gain additional hexes for controlling a hex with a flag and a worker or a mech, a character, or even an unoccupied structure, unless that flag hex is adjacent to the home base. So I like to spread the flags out further into the board and gain more value from this Exalt ability here in the faction ability section and the Rally ability here in the mech ability section. Mechs tend to be fairly central to Albion's strategy, so I'm going to trade as my second action here, and that allows me to get one of these efficient top row, bottom row turns where I'm able to produce and then immediately deploy a mech. Which mech to deploy? Well, if it's going to be a bit more of an aggressive game at the start, if I'm worried that someone's going to be attacking me early on, I might go for the defensive Shield or Rally, which is defensive in the sense that if I do get sent back home to the base, I can quickly move back up onto the board on my next turn. If, on the other hand, I'm not too worried about being attacked early on, I would probably go for either the burrow to increase my movement options, or for sword to increase my combat options. In this case, since there is a peninsula here that is not occupied by an opponent, this burrow would allow me to move from the tunnel space here onto this peninsula and give me some fairly uncontested space. As we can see here from Riverwalk, Albion can of course move onto any of the original 5 factions' home peninsulas, and this can make Albion a fairly aggressive neighbor. So if you are playing Nord or Polania and Albion is on the table, you may want to play a little bit more defensively yourself. In fact, when I was playing through the Rise of Fenris campaign with my play group at home, I often played Nord, and a friend of mine often played Albion. He ended up winning the campaign, and the two of us spent several games in that campaign fighting over this territory right in here between these two factions. In this case, since I'm not really worried about a particularly aggressive Rusviet or Crimea, I'm going to go with Burrow. And in this case, I'll be able to go back and forth between these two actions, trading and then producing, to easily gain my mech stars and my worker stars fairly early on. I always like to leave one worker unproduced, as it were, so that I'm not charged that extra coin when I do production in the future. As you can see, I will be quickly gaining all of my mechs. I am going to do a move here first, though, since I do want to get a flag out on the board, and I do want to move some of these workers off of this village hex here onto a hex where they will be more useful. And in this case, I'm moving towards Tundra because this board is going to reward Tundra, the reward being on Tundra, rather, because I'll be able to spend the oil to get upgrades, which will be worth 3 coins. So we've got gain 2 food and 1 popularity, pay $3 to build a structure, or pay 2 popularity to gain a worker and 3 wood. So I need to be careful with my popularity. If I pay this 2 popularity, then I'm going to be out of popularity. I won't be able to produce. So I don't want to do that. Structure. Let's take a look here. So it would be a structure on another Tundra hex. That could be useful as perhaps a mill. Or I could just take the safe 2 food and 1 popularity. I think I'm going to do the structure. I like that. Well, I like the mill idea, but I also like this one here, constructing the monument, because as I bolster in the future, then my popularity will start to go up as well. So I think I'm going to go for that and place the first flag. So since I have this monument here and the flag, I don't actually have to leave anything else on this hex in order to get the hex bonus at the end. The monument itself is enough to hold the hex for me. And in fact, if I can just keep this hex well defended, it would be pretty hard for an opponent to ever move on to this hex. You'll notice on this board, I'm not going to be particularly well rewarded for picking up the recruit action, which is something that I typically like to do in Scythe because it is such a powerful action. But in this case, it's not great for this board. Um, so I'm not going to be recruiting. I'm going to be focusing on other stars, such as getting the mechs out and using them to fight the other factions, or just working on other stars. Generally, when you pick up a new board, you want to see which of the actions are going to give you more coins and focus on those actions, even if they are powerful actions such as recruit. Generally better to focus on the coins, in my experience. Your experience may be different, but that's generally what I found when playing. So we'll need to trade one last time for enough metal. And I am not going to produce the last worker because even though it will get me the star, I will be doing other production actions in the course of the gameplay, and I don't want to make that production too expensive for myself. So here's my fourth mech. Of course, we'll put it as far out on the board as we can. First star on the board. And now we can start bolstering in order. Actually, I think I'm actually going to do combat cards. And of course, that's because Albion doesn't start with any combat cards. That's something that I will want to start gaining as quickly as I can. And you'll notice here I can now move from this space that had an encounter to this space that has an encounter with my character. And I'm going to come over here, I think. So let's see what this encounter is. We can get some money and popularity. We can get a recruit, or 2 popularity for a worker and 3 food. Gonna pass on this one. Again, the 2 popularity just shuts out production for me entirely. I think in this case, I'm gonna grab the recruit that will give me additional power for upgrading, since I know I'm going to be upgrading throughout the course of the game. Could grab the combat cards or the popularity. In this case, I like the popularity because that will give me more flexibility with future encounters. So we'll start getting our combat card engine started here. I always like upgrading the produce action when I can. And at this point, it doesn't really matter too much which of these that I choose to upgrade, because I'm really upgrading for the coins, not for the upgrade bonus. But I think I am going to do the enlist here. That could get the enlist down to the point where I could just pay the 1 coin in order to recruit. And that's really not a bad combo either. Once again, because of that character ability, I'm able to move on to a new encounter. And I'm going to also expand my little Albion empire out a bit. Now that I'm on a tunnel, I can go to any of these other tunnels and pick another peninsula to start invading. That's a good spot over there. Well, we don't need to deploy any mechs. I think the 2 food and the 1 popularity will be good here. And I do want to place that flag. You can see by combining the flag placing from Exalt and the mech ability rally, how quickly Albion can move the character around the board, and of course moving mechs and workers to different areas as well. I do need to do a produce to get some more oil. Not going to be my final production of the game by any stretch, so I'm going to keep this final worker off the board for now. At any rate, I hope that gives you a fairly good idea of how Albion plays. It can be either an aggressive or a defensive faction. It can be used to great board position all over the board. It can move around fairly quickly, even though it doesn't have the speed ability. Once you get into the factory, of course, you will have the additional movement from the factory card that can help speed up Albion a little bit. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on the next Scythe Faction Focus.